Welcome to Redefining Medicine, an intimate and personalized program that illustrates a different side of the practice of medicine. Our in-depth conversations will focus on the physicians and practitioners who are redefining medicine through their integrative, functional, and holistic approach to health and well-being.
Welcome to our weekly podcast, Redefining Medicine. We are pleased to welcome back Dr. Kien Vuu, a concierge performance and longevity physician, founder of VuuMD Longevity and Performance Clinic, and assistant professor of health sciences at UCLA, an author, and upcoming special guest moderator and speaker at the upcoming 29th annual A4M World Congress. Welcome back, Dr. Vuu.
It is a pleasure to be on. I am so excited to be moderating and being a special guest again on this year's World Congress in December.
We are just as excited. It's been a few months since we last spoke. Can you give us some updates on what you've been working on and any particular challenges or new breakthroughs you have experienced during this time?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I think the last time we talked, I had just launched my book, Thrive State, which you see behind me. And if you're on audio podcast, you can't see it, but you can go to thrivestatebook.com to take a look at the book, or certainly to pick up a copy of yourself. But that book launched, and really it was a couple of years in the making. It was really the story of how I reversed my own chronic illness, but it was a deep dive as to how I came up with this bioenergetic model of health and how patients and clients using this model can really empower them, knowing that through their conscious choices, through how they live up in their own life, how they show up in the world actually has a huge effect on their epigenome, and that leads to optimal health, longevity, and peak performance. So I launched that. I also recently launched the Thrive State Accelerator, which is the online companion course for the book. So any clinician out there that wants a lifestyle program to share with their clients, go to my website, Kien Vuu, that's KIENVUU.com. And you'll have this online course that you could share with your clients, share with your patients, that goes through all the lifestyle factors for optimal health, longevity, and peak performance. And then lastly, I am a new dad. I became a dad to my daughter January of this year, and we had a scare. She spent a couple of days in the ICU, and it's been challenges ever since she's been born. But she ended up in the ICU because she had her cord wrapped around her neck, and I was thinking, what would have happened if she had some brain damage? I was scared. I was going through all these thoughts and, everything in my mind. And when I finally just held her in my arms the first time, she had a tube down her nose, a tube down her mouth, and her poor little foot has been stuck so many times. And you can see these little pop marks, but I remember just thinking that she's just perfect the way she is. And I look at that and I reflect back on my own life, because there's many times in my life I'm thinking, I've got stories of not being enough. And it was just very much a healing process. So that's been beautiful. And, I think becoming a new dad has really given me perspective and the medicine that being present and not in our heads and just being in front of the people that we are with is so healing. And so those are the things that I've been up to since the last time we've talked. And it's been an amazing ride.
Well, congratulations on the new addition to your family, Dr. Vuu. Earlier this year, you were interviewed on the topic of emotional intelligence. For clinicians working to deliver personalized, mindful care to patients, this topic is incredibly valuable. Will you explain first what emotional intelligence is, and please share some tips on how to increase it?
Great question. So emotional intelligence is also known by some people as your emotional quotient, or your EQ. And that's really the ability to be aware of, to understand, to use, and to manage our emotions in a constructive manner. And having good EQ is so important because it allows us to better communicate with people. And certainly if you're a clinician wanting to influence others, it's important to know where your client is coming from an emotional space, but know where you're at, because your emotional state will determine whether or not you are able to be heard by your client or those that you want to communicate with. It's also really important to help relieve stress. And it really helps to empathize with the people that you are connecting or communicating with. And lastly, having good EQ is also super important to deal with any type of challenges. I mean, I know in my own personal romantic relationship with my fiance, knowing our own triggers, knowing that, it is not something within our relationship, but some of our past sometimes that we get pulled in on, and our emotions come up. Being able to be aware of that so that we can choose instead how we want to show up in our communication has been super, super valuable. So you asked a great question. How do we improve our emotional intelligence? And it all stems down from just one, having the awareness, knowing that the things that we feel, knowing that the things that we think sometimes aren't truly ours. Sometimes it's old programming. And we have to be aware of the old programming that comes up because, we don't show up at our best. We don't think at our very best. We're not very creative. And so one, having awareness is key. And how do you develop more awareness of your emotions? Well, one, I find journaling is so important. Being able to just write down how you feel and how you think puts things down on paper so that you can just analyze it. Another great thing to do is just be aware, start to take emotional inventory of how you're feeling. And when you know how you're feeling, you could then start to ask the questions, what were the things that triggered that feeling? If a negative emotion stirs up, is it an old story of not being enough or not being worthy? Being able to recognize those things, because if you could recognize those things, then you have the ability to shift some of those old negative patterns that just keep showing up. I've got this technique that I talk about in my book, Thrive State. And it's a technique that I adapted from a quote from the Holocaust survivor, Viktor Frankl. He says, between stimulus and response, there's a space. And in that space is our power to choose a response. And in our response lies our growth and freedom. So whenever something negative, comes up within you, if you feel that a negative emotional charge, create space. And how do you do that? You could do that by taking 10 deep breaths in through your nose, out through your mouth. That will activate your parasympathetic nervous system, and it'll just dampen down that emotion. So you've created space. And in that space is our power to choose the response. So I tell people, in that space where you're doing that 10 deep breaths, act. Then that stands for awareness, choice, and take action. Have the awareness, like, oh, here's this negative emotional charge. What's coming up for me? Is it that old story again? Is it that I'm not enough, I'm not worthy, some of those old things coming up? Have the awareness as to why that emotion is coming up. Then choose or choice. Okay, well, a negative emotion is coming up, but do you want to show up with joy? Do you want to show up with love? Do you want to show up with gratitude? Have an intention of showing up differently. And with that new intention, take new action. So if I'm arguing with my partner, I'm like, oh my God, this old part of me is getting triggered. I don't want to show up that way. I want to show up with love, with connection. Honey, I'm sorry. I'm going to start to take new action. Honey, I'm sorry. This was an old reaction. I want to listen. Can we start over? And then when you start to take new action that way, you basically are creating new patterns in your body. So this is a great technique to use when you find that negative emotions are coming up, and then you get to choose how you really, really want to show up.
Let's turn to some exciting news. A4M has recently announced that in addition to you serving as special guest moderator, you will also be leading a presentation at the upcoming 29th annual A4M World Congress titled Thrive State, the Forgotten 5 Keys to Natural Longevity. Will you provide us with a little preview of your topic?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'm so excited to talk about this. Now, being a fellow of the A4M, I have learned so much. We have advances in technology to really kind of take our lifespan and our health span to the next level, whether it be, genetic engineering with CRISPR, whether it be stem cells and regenerative medicine, whether it be exosomes or new targets for longevity, including the sirtuin family, the mTOR family, or working on the AMPK kinase. There is all this advanced technology that I'm super excited about. However, if we started to look around the world of where people live the longest, like in Sardinia, over in Italy, or in Ikaria, Greece, or Okinawa in Japan, or Loma Linda in California, when we start to look at these societies, none of these advances have actually reached to those points yet. So there are actually things in our ancient wisdom that have been passed down by centuries of people who have lived a really long time, and we've really forgotten about them. And what this talk is it's going to dive through some of these ancient wisdoms, some of these ancient traditions, to know that, in fact, if we live a certain way, we can actually activate our epigenome, create and craft our epigenome to have our cells thrive, to have our cells get to a point to give us optimal longevity, peak performance, and optimal health. And really the talk is, how do we start to marry all these advances in technology with the ancient wisdoms we know in the past together so that we have a long and fruitful life?
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Vuu. We are beyond excited to see you live in Las Vegas for the 29th Annual World Congress. We are so lucky to have you be our special guest and to see you on stage. Thank you.
Thank you.
And to all of our listeners, we look forward to seeing you there. And until next time.